Tier list. That's right, we're back with another tier list. Now, a week or so ago, I made a video about the best decks from the latest Rush Duel update, and that was a little self-contained to just those decks introduced on the update. But I figured there was enough of a shakeup of what decks are good that we should talk again about what cards you should be putting in those decks. Now, the restructuring of the top decks actually changed a whole lot of what cards you should be playing in your deck. So, I've actually made a Stables tier list before. You could check that out if you want to. I do go in a little bit more detail on some of the cards that I'm going to be talking about again here, but not as deep, so you should check that out if you want to hear more about specific cards. But I also went ahead and trimmed a lot of the fat off the list because there are so many cards from my first list that aren't even considerations for the current meta. And actually, speaking of the current meta, I want to start at the top. Previously, on the last video, I had two cards that were instant smashes into your must-play tier. I should mention, our tiers are must-play, play if you can, should play, wouldn't advise playing, do not play. This has also changed a little bit from what I did last time, because there are some cards that when I say play if you can, this is the specific tier I'm kind of changing here, that I'm saying you should play these cards, but most decks will not be able to play them. So play if you can and should play are kind of the same tier, but play if you can is at a point where if you're like playing Metarion, no, you don't have to side in something like Ancient Gear Golem. Like, you don't need to slot in Ancient Gear Golem if you're playing Hero, you know? That's what I'm trying to say. So, the two cards I want to talk about were Negate Attack and Widespread Ruin. These were my must-play tiered cards from the last list, and actually, I am moving Widespread Ruin down to wouldn't advise playing. Now, what exactly changed to make this happen? Well, number one, with a bullet, is the first card I want to put in play if you can. Secret Order. Secret Order not only boosts a normal monster's attack to a very high degree, it makes them immune to trap destruction, and that's just one of the many cards introduced that have a similar effect. Some are, like, some Earth Machines have that effect, some regular monsters have that effect, cannot be destroyed by trap effects, or cannot respond with trap effects, was printed basically in mass in the latest update, which is why I'm putting a widespread down to wouldn't advise playing. Now, this is where the issue comes. Well, I need to play a Legend Trap in my deck, but if we can't play Negate Attack because we have a limit 2, obviously we'd be forced to play widespread, or we would play Trap Hole, which is actually my first card in Do Not Play. I do not think Trap Hole is any good right now. I think they seriously messed up the release of Trap Hole. I think this card should have been in the game closer to the original release of Rush. The problem with Trap Hole in the current format is how many cards just special summon themselves, or get special summoned by other card effects. What that means is this card is bad against Cyber Dragon. This card is bad against Metarion. This card is just really bad in so many places that I would have to say do not play it. If you cannot play Negate Attack, play Widespread, but if you can play Negate Attack, play Negate Attack. It's really hard. It's really, really hard to say, you know, play the card that I wouldn't advise you to play, but our options aren't that good, and you can't play nothing. You can widespread certain points in a duel, right? Like, you can widespread Twin Dragon, you can widespread the bigger Cyber Dragons. It's fine against Cyber Dragon. The problem comes with the next card that you should play if you can, which is Ancient Gear Golem. Ancient Gear Golem just solos all the traps and hit a point where we have to just ignore this guy when I talk about trap cards. because he warps the way trap cards kind of get played in Rush. I've been completely soloed by an Ancient Gear Golem because I end up bricking on spell traps because I only have my battle traps set on field, so I can't set any of my other spells or my other traps if I was playing other traps, and Golem just attacks in twice and I lose. That's a real situation. These cards all kind of like meld together in my reasonings, which is why I just slammed them all on the screen right now. Now, let's put our other must-play card, Slime. So, Slime has the same problem of losing to Ancient Gear Golem, but it has the added benefit of at least keeping you alive if they misorder their attacks. If they don't swing with Golem first, you can at least Slime to keep yourself from dying. Slime is one of the most important cards in the game. Play Slime, always play Slime. Most decks will not put any kind of trap restriction on you, so you should always be throwing in Slime. Now, there's another card right here, the Barrier, to stick with trap cards. I'd say do not play the Barrier, not because it is specifically bad, but because a lot of decks are actually getting their own in-archetype barrier-like cards, and usually those give a subtraction of 500 attack, where the barrier is only 400. Speaking of one of those cards, play Dragon's Fortitude if you can. Dragon's Fortitude is a weird card, right? First of all, you have to be on a dragon deck to play this card in the first place, but it's very, very impactful. It's so impactful that they put it to limit 1. And there are so many dragon decks that kind of like splash cards. I'm talking about things like Dragios Turbo, Dragios Aggro, Blue Eyes Aggro. All these decks that are splashing dragons can play Dragon's Fortitude and the monster that searches it to just have its own special battle trap that is much stronger than any other in-archetype battle trap. As well, I think I'm just going to clear out all our traps here. Next up is Musical Princess Recital. I wouldn't advise playing this card. It's just not as good as other battle traps, and I'm also trying to keep us at a point where we aren't losing to cards that don't care. Like Cyber Twin Dragon does not care about this. They'll still get at least one attack in. Dragios doesn't care about this. Ancient Gear Golem certainly doesn't care about this. The best cards that this can stop are like Flame Wingman or a normal monster that has gotten secret ordered, kind of. But those use cases aren't as good, to be honest, which is why I wouldn't advise playing it. You can. I just would say you probably should. Must play. So this is the Machine Spell Trap Destroyer. This is only on here because it's representing all the archetypal MSTs, all the Spell Trap Destroyers. If you're playing a deck without the Spell Trap Destroyer, I don't really understand what you're doing. Like, you're just making your deck worse by having no answers for spell traps. Now, there is one trap I just realized I skipped, and it's one of the ones I want to talk about the most. Card Restoration. You should play Card Restoration. This card is a very nice one of that. If you are playing at an advantage where you can empty out your entire hand, Card Restoration not only will heal you, but will let you draw 6. And the amount of times that this card not only has saved me, but has perfectly drawn me the hand I needed. What I mean by that is, obviously, I was going to draw those 5 cards anyway, but Restoration drawing me the 5, healing me, and then getting the 6th, and the 6th has been that little cherry on top of the perfect hand every time. The only time Card Restoration didn't save me is when I got attacked by Ancient Gear Golem for game. So, to keep in the little overarching plot of our trap cards, Ancient Gear Golem just completely solos. Another must play, Essel. I say this every time. I'm not going to say her effect every time. Essel's the best. She's the reason why going second is so strong. Play Essel if you can play Essel. Simple. Just read her once and you'll go, oh my god, this card's insane. Another for do not play, Shield and Sword. really, this card is only on here because it's legend. This is one of the cards I was going to trim off the list just to get this a little smaller. But honestly, it's so bad. Like, there's a lot of cards it affects in a decent way as part of the meta. It's just not worth it because you could be playing Tribute to the Doomed, which I say you must play. I think Tribute to the Doomed being a nice little 1-for-1 destruction. It's at the point where you really need that to clear houses like Ancient Gear Golem, Cyber Twin Dragon, a Metarion Fusion, a card that got secret ordered the previous turn, so now it's just a big, most likely a 2500 guy that you're just staring down. You're like, oh my god, my hero deck can't swing over 25 right now, you know? Now, I have Fusion and Star Restart that I'm going to put into play if you can. Now, obviously, not everyone's playing a Fusion deck. A lot of Fusion decks did get released with the update, so I'm putting these two together to say these are actually pretty nice. If you are playing a critical mass of Fusion monsters, you can use Fusion in a deck that doesn't even play Fusions for Fusion Deal, which is, you know, like Hammer Crush Deal, lets you draw a card. But if you don't want to play Hammer Crush Deal, you can play Fusion and you can play Star Restart. So if you like pitch the Fusion, you can Star Restart, get a normal monster special summon back from the grave. Obviously you're going to be playing a normal monster, that's pretty much our fodder. Get Fusion to hand, Fusion Deal, set the Fusion, draw a card. I think that's a really nice little combo that I've seen. As well, any Fusion deck has to play at least Fusion, and I would recommend putting Star Restart in as well. It is the key piece of Metarion, really, in my opinion. Speaking of the other key piece, I'm going to put Monster Reincarnation in play if you can. Now, usually I would consider this card with its power level to go into must play, but I personally believe that if we're saying that we're building, you know, the top tier deck, which a top tier deck would be something like Cyber Dragon, you would want to play Tribute over Reincarnation. Reincarnation is really powerful in Metarion. It's also really powerful in OG Light Machine, in the specifically the Mirror Innovator deck, because you can play the Metarion Imaginary Reactor, I want to say his name is, and that resetting Reincarnation into your deck for the draw 2 is very powerful. So it's good in both Metarion and Light Machine, but the two decks doesn't push it up to must-play status. For the same reason, I don't have the Warrior Returning Alive on the list, because that's only good in Hero, and we're not really considering things that are that important for just one deck on our tier list here. Now, there are some generic monsters left on the list I want to just throw in here. We've got All-Seeing Harvey. Now, this is a really fun card. I've been having a lot of fun with Harvey in my sort of like off-meta decks, things like Monarch, things like Earth Machine. She's nice to get information on the opponent's board, or if you can combo her with a card that flips things face down, she could also act as removal. She's not crazy powerful. The reason I'm putting her in should play is just if you're playing one of those kinds of decks and you kind of like tier 3, kind of more of like a little pile-esque deck, I would say you should play her. Speaking of those pile decks, we also have Rhythmical Performer. She was more of a staple in the previous format, the pre-update format, and all she really did for us was just be an occasional draw with also a mill. She's not great. If you're playing a deck that doesn't really restrict what kind of monsters you can have in it, I would say play her. She's not like a crazy ultra important card or anything though, so don't worry if you can't fit her in. Don't worry, you don't need to find space for her. As well, I have another card for should play, Stealth Magic. Now, this is a me thing. This is a me thing. I think this card is actually really powerful for being what is essentially just a mill. It just mills a card from your hand and just refreshes that card. It gives you a bonus if you're behind, I'm playing this card in my Metarion deck to basically sometimes what I do is I pitch Reincarnation with this card if I don't have a good target to Reincarnation, and then I use Imaginary Reactor, put Reincarnation back, draw 2. So I essentially drew 3 new cards, which will help me find something like Star Restart or Fusion if I'm missing them. That's just one way. I think this is also really good in the more aggro focused decks. Basically, if you have a piece that isn't one of your aggro pieces, if it's just like fodder you don't need, just pitch it, you know? Speaking of those kinds of decks, Hammer Crush. I mean, Hammer Crush is the MST for decks that don't have MST, that don't have a Spell Trap Destroyer. So you should play Hammer Crush if you don't have one. Or if you're playing more of a mixed deck, like Monarchs play both sometimes Dragons and Cybers, or Warriors and Cybers, those kinds of decks, you should play Hammer Crush, basically. Now, Ghost Cyclone. I'm going to put that in play if you can. I was Ghost Cyclone's biggest hater, I want to say, after not the previous update, the update before last, because I just felt like it got completely power crept by all the Spell Trap Destroyers being released for all the archetypes. But honestly, it's actually shown itself to be much more powerful in the current format. I can't tell you how many times I had gotten Ghost Cycloned into Ghost Cycloned into Ghost Cycloned. Like, I have it on, there's a video on my channel. I don't remember which video it is, but there is a video on the channel of that happening to me. If you find that, leave in the comments if you find out which video it was. I know it's definitely up, I think. Little quest, if you can find it, find it. But that has happened to me multiple times, once on video as well. Ghost Cyclone building for us going second, it just works. It's just worked more the more you want to go second. So previously going second wasn't perfect. Going first or going second was still good. But with the current format, I think you always want to go second, and we don't really have a choice, but you should be building for going second. Speaking of that, I would now like to put Boltracorn in Do Not Play. Honestly, if you're playing a machine deck, it's fine to play your one of Boltracorn. I just hate this. I hate this card so much. I do not like it. I don't think it's good at all, but I will not fight a machine player for just putting it in if they have an open slot. But I would tell anyone else who will listen, do not play this card outside of a machine deck. It's just not that good. Now, our last of the kind of like generic monster staples, we have Torero. So previously on the last list, I also included his trap here, and that the trap is garbage. It never comes up. No good at all. Torero himself, though, he's pretty good. So he's another card that works really well in the kind of like quote-unquote pile decks, cards that are playing without a restriction on what their lower tier monsters can be. They're, you know, lower attacks, lower level type monsters. And he's kind of like an all-star. He also combos with All-Seeing Harvey, where he can flip the opponent's monster, and then Harvey can then just pop it if it's the turn she summoned them. So they combo pretty well together in the generic. I would recommend, if you're playing one of them, you should play the other in your deck as well. Torero, he's a nice 2-of. He's a really nice 2-of. I would recommend you include in your decks. Now, our last card is Talismanic Seal Array. Must play. Must play. Must play. I think Seal Array is going to be a staple for a very long time in Rush. It is one of the key cards for refreshing your tools, refreshing your monsters, lowering the opponent's attack. It's the best tool at doing that, and it's perfectly fine being a one-of in every single deck, as long as we're in a format where the battle phase matters, which, as far as I can tell, is Rush full stop. And that's the list. I definitely got us in and out of this much quicker than the last video. That was the idea, to just, you know, get this a little more concise. But if you disagree with my list in any way possible, leave that in the comments. I would love to hear what you think maybe I missed. Maybe you think something should be in a different position. If there's a card on here you think shouldn't be even considered a staple, leave that in the comments. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching if you watched this video. Check out my other tier lists if you haven't watched the tier lists. And that's it. Goodbye. Don't mind me, I'm just organizing the list for our thumbnail so people can't just peek at the thumbnail and say, oh, I know what those cards are, so that must be the list, huh? So they actually have to click on the video and see what the real list is, huh? Think about that. Think about that, huh?